My name is Naomi Parker. I'm 29 years old. The sentence that ended my relationship did not sound dramatic enough to matter. There was no shouting, no shattered plates, no door slammed so hard the walls trembled, no cinematic moment anyone would have pointed to later and said, "There, that was the exact second everything broke." Just my boyfriend standing in the doorway of our bedroom with one hand still on the frame, his expression already halfway bored, halfway annoyed, telling me he needed me to leave our apartment for the weekend because his friends were coming over and they did not like me. That was all. He said it the way people ask someone to move a coat or take out the trash, like it was logistical, like the real problem was whether I would make it inconvenient. "I need you to be out for a bit," he said. "The guys are coming this weekend, and honestly, they don't really like you." I remember staring at him. Not because I did not hear him, because I heard him too clearly. The apartment was warm, too warm, the kind of late evening heat that made the air feel still and slightly stale. The dishwasher was running in the kitchen. The lamp near the couch was on, casting that soft yellow light that usually made the place feel calm. That night it only made everything look staged. Too normal for the kind of sentence I had just been handed. "Leave?" I asked. Not loudly, not emotionally. Just that one word. He let out a breath through his nose and shifted his weight like I was already exhausting him. "Naomi, don't do this." "Do what?" "Make it a whole thing." That phrase, "make it a whole thing." Ethan loved that phrase because it turned any hurt, any confusion, any reasonable reaction into a character flaw. It let him act like the problem was never what he said, only that I reacted to it. I kept my eyes on him. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" He shrugged, actually shrugged. "Stay with a friend. Get a hotel. I don't know. It's just for the weekend." Just for the weekend. I think that was the first moment something cold moved through me. Not anger, not yet. Just the first quiet shift of something inside me stepping back. I asked him why they did not like me. He answered too fast. "They think you're controlling." For 1 second, I almost laughed. Controlling. This from the man who once sulked for 2 days because I went to brunch with coworkers and did not text him back fast enough. This from the same boyfriend who scrolled through my phone last winter while I was in the shower because, according to him, I had been acting distant. This from a man who liked my patience only when it looked like surrender. Still, I did not fight. I just stood there, arms loose at my sides, and looked at him long enough to make him slightly uncomfortable. Then I said very calmly, "All right." The relief in his face was instant. That part stayed with me later. More than the insult, more than the dismissal, that visible release in his shoulders, the tiny easing around his mouth, like he thought he had successfully managed me, like he had just solved a scheduling issue. "See," he said, "that wasn't hard." Then he looked back down at his phone. Conversation over. No apology, no hesitation, no attempt to soften it. I turned toward the closet and pulled out an overnight bag. At first, even I told myself that was what I was packing for. A weekend. A temporary inconvenience. Something practical. But then I added a second pair of jeans. Then work clothes. Then my charger. Then my laptop stand. Then the folder where I kept my documents. Then toiletries. Then the pair of running shoes I always left by the hall table. A strange silence settled over the room, broken only by the zipping of compartments and the low hum of the air conditioner. Ethan did not look up for the first few minutes. I do not know if he assumed I would perform hurt for him first, or if he truly believed I would toss 2 shirts in a bag and disappear obediently until he was ready for me again. He noticed only when I unplugged my monitor from the desk. "What are you doing?" he asked. I glanced over my shoulder. "Packing?" His forehead creased. "For a weekend, Naomi? Why do you need all that?" His tone sharpened on the last 2 words, like my belongings were now evidence against me. I kept my voice level. "Might as well bring what I need." He gave a short scoff and leaned against the dresser. "You always do this." "Do what?" "This passive-aggressive thing where you act calm but make everything dramatic." That landed harder than I wanted it to, because I was calm. I was doing exactly what he asked. And somehow even that had become another offense. I folded another sweater and laid it into the suitcase more carefully than necessary. My hands were steady. That bothered him too. I could feel it. He crossed his arms. "You know they don't dislike you for no reason." I looked up at that. There it was, the justification he had prepared for himself. "Last time," he said, "you made things weird with Vanessa." I blinked. "By doing what?" "By correcting her in front of everyone. She said something false about the election." He rolled his eyes. "See, that. You always have to be right." I stared at him for a second, and in the space between us I saw the memory clearly. His friend Vanessa, half drunk at dinner, confidently repeating nonsense. Me correcting one detail, politely. Ethan's hand tightening on my knee under the table, not affectionate, not reassuring, but warning me to stop talking. I had gone quiet that night to keep the peace. Apparently, even that had not been enough. Okay, I said. He straightened. Why do you keep saying it like that? Like what? Like you're above this. I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it was revealing. My silence felt threatening to him now. If I had cried, he would have known his role. If I had argued, he would have known the script. But calm forced him to sit with his own words. He looked away first. You'll be back Sunday night, he said. We can talk after. Then, as if remembering one last condition, he added casually, and don't text me while they're here. I don't want it to be awkward. That was the sentence that sank deepest. Not give me space. Not let's cool off. Just don't exist where my real life can see you. My throat tightened, but I did not let it show. I zipped the suitcase, picked up my backpack, and wheeled both bags toward the front door. Only then did he seem startled by the amount. You're seriously bringing all that? I looked at him. You asked me to leave. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer was apparently too direct for him. The hallway outside smelled like someone else's dinner. Garlic, onions, something roasted. The elevator took too long. I stood there with 2 suitcases and a backpack, feeling ridiculous and strangely hollow, while behind me, the apartment door stayed shut. He did not come after me. He did not ask where I was going. He did not say he loved me. The elevator mirror showed me a woman who looked composed enough to be mistaken for unaffected. But my chest felt oddly empty, like something had already been removed and my body had not adjusted to the space it left behind. I stayed with my friend Rachel that first night. Rachel opened the door, took one look at the bags, and did not ask questions I could not answer yet. She just stepped aside, handed me a clean towel, and said, You can take the couch or the bed. I'm not letting you pretend this is normal. I laughed softly at that, though it came out brittle. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face when I said all right. Not regret, not guilt, relief. Saturday morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a phone full of silence from him. Not a single message asking if I had gotten somewhere safely. Not a single word checking whether I was okay. At 10:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. A payment request. My share of utilities. Due that day. I stared at the notification so long Rachel finally asked, What happened? I turned the screen toward her. She looked at it, then at me, and let out one slow, disbelieving breath. He pushed you out and still billed you? I should have declined it. I know that now. But habit is a hard thing to kill when it has been dressed up as responsibility for long enough. I paid it. Instantly. Cleanly. No message attached. That was my first mistake after leaving. Around noon, Ethan texted. Everything good? Not are you okay? Not thanks for understanding. Just a status check, like I was a delivery route he wanted updated. I replied with one word. Yes. The typing bubble appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then, cool, we're doing brunch, then drinks later. Might be a late night. I read that twice. I pictured them there in the apartment I helped pay for, sitting on the couch I picked out, opening the wine I bought, joking about me like I was a personality defect they had all generously tolerated. I muted the conversation. Rachel left me alone most of the afternoon, which I appreciated. I sat by her window with a mug of coffee gone lukewarm in my hands and started replaying moments I had filed away under not worth fighting about. The time Ethan called me intense because I did not laugh when his friend made a rude joke about my job. The way he would narrate my reactions to other people before I could speak for myself. Naomi gets weird about stuff like this. Naomi overthinks everything. Naomi can be a little much. How often had he translated me into someone easier to dismiss? By evening, the ache in my chest had sharpened into something more precise, not heartbreak exactly, recognition. Rachel sat down across from me near sunset and asked the one question I had been avoiding. Do you really think this is temporary? I opened my mouth to say yes. Nothing came out. That silence answered for me. At 1:52 in the morning, my phone rang. Ethan. I should have ignored it. Instead, I answered on the 4th ring. His voice was bright in that loose, careless way people sound when they are drunk and surrounded by other people. Hey, he said over loud laughter and bar noise. We're out of wine. Where do you keep the backup? I said nothing. Naomi, he pressed. Hello? Don't be weird. And there it was. Not I miss you. Not can we talk? Not even thanks again for leaving. Just a request. Another function. Another proof that, in his mind, I still existed somewhere in the wings, ready to support the life he was living without me. In the cabinet above the fridge, I said. He laughed. See, this is why I love you. You're so reliable. Then he hung up. I sat there in the dim blue light from Rachel's kitchen, the phone still in my hand, listening to the deadline. Reliable. That was what I had been reduced to. Not cherished, not protected, not chosen. Useful. And for the first time since I walked out of that apartment, the truth arrived, without confusion attached to it. He did not miss me. He missed what I carried for him. By the time dawn started thinning the darkness at the edges of the window, I was still awake. But something inside me had gone very still. Sunday had not arrived yet. And already, somewhere deep down, I knew I was not going back. Sunday arrived with the kind of quiet that makes decisions feel older than they are. I woke up on Rachel's couch just after 7, still wearing yesterday's sweatshirt, my neck sore, my mouth dry, my mind already made up in a place deeper than words. Outside her apartment window, the city was gray and damp. Overnight rain had left the sidewalks slick and shining. A delivery truck idled at the curb below. Somewhere in the building, pipes knocked softly in the walls. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered everything at once. The doorway, his voice. They don't like you. I need you to leave for a bit. And then the call in the middle of the night, asking where the backup wine was, as if I were still some invisible extension of his convenience. I lay there staring at the ceiling and realized I felt something strange. Not rage, not panic, not even grief in the dramatic sense. Just certainty. The kind that settles quietly, without asking permission. Rachel was already in the kitchen when I got up, barefoot, hair twisted into a loose knot, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. She looked at me for half a second and seemed to understand that something had shifted. You sleep at all? She asked. Not really. She handed me a mug. You going back today? I wrapped both hands around the warmth and looked down into the coffee instead of at her. No, I said. The word came out so easily it startled me. Rachel did not smile. She did not say good or finally or anything that would have made the moment smaller than it was. She just nodded once, like she was accepting a fact I had finally accepted too. Okay, she said softly. Then today is for logistics. That word helped. Logistics. Not heartbreak, not collapse, not some grand theatrical ending. Just the practical work of taking my life back into my own hands. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. They're heading out tonight. You can come back after. I stared at that sentence for a long time. You can come back. Not can we talk? Not come home. Not even I'd like you back. He said it like he was granting me access to a place I had helped build. Like I had been temporarily removed from the frame, and he was now generously allowing me to return to my designated position. I did not answer. 10 minutes later, another message came. Let's not drag this out. I almost laughed. As if he had not started this by treating me like a problem to relocate. As if my silence was somehow more extreme than his request. I set the phone face down on the table and drank the rest of my coffee cold. By late afternoon, I drove toward our apartment. I told myself I just wanted to see it once before deciding anything final. Closure, maybe? Or maybe I needed one last look at the shape of the life I was refusing to step back into. The streets were still damp, the sky low and pale. When I turned onto our block, 3 cars were still lined along the curb outside the building. One of them belonged to his friend Tyler. Another was Vanessa's boyfriend's battered SUV. I recognized them immediately, and something about that tightened my chest. They were still there, still inside, still comfortable, still taking up space in the apartment Ethan had acted like I could be removed from without consequence. I slowed at the light and looked up toward our windows. The blinds were tilted open just enough to catch a flicker of movement inside. Someone crossed the living room. Someone laughed. Even through the closed windows and the traffic between us, I could almost hear it, the low hum of people relaxed in a place they had never had to earn. And I knew with a kind of absolute clarity that I could not walk back into that apartment as if nothing had happened. If I returned that night, it would not be forgiveness. It would be agreement. Agreement that I was movable. Agreement that I was secondary. Agreement that all he had to do was wait for my hurt to cool into usefulness again. The light changed. I kept driving. Back at Rachel's place, I sat at her small dining table with a notepad and started making lists. My bank account, my streaming subscriptions, the electric bill, the internet, my work equipment, my documents, the furniture I had paid for, the kitchen things I had bought piece by piece when we moved in because Ethan said he would Venmo me later and usually forgot. The strange thing was how calm I felt doing it. Not numb, not detached. Focused. Like a storm had already passed through, and this was the cleanup nobody ever films, because it lacks spectacle, even though it is the part that actually determines whether you survive. At 9:47 p.m., my phone lit up. Ethan. I looked at the screen until the ringing almost stopped, then answered. He did not say hello. Okay, he said, you can come home now. My grip tightened on the phone. There it was again. That tone, that assumption, that casual authority over something that no longer belonged to him. I'm not coming back tonight, I said. Silence. Not long. Just long enough to hear the first crack in his confidence. Then he gave a short, disbelieving laugh. What do you mean you're not coming back? I mean exactly that. Naomi, don't do this. I closed my eyes for a second. Do what? This whole punishment thing. Punishment. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the rain-streaked window across from me. I'm not punishing you. Then what is this? I'm listening. That stopped him. What does that even mean? His voice had gone sharp, but underneath it I heard something else now. Not remorse, not yet. Just irritation slipping toward instability. It means, I said carefully, you were very clear. You needed me gone, so I left. That is not what I meant, and you know it. Then what did you mean? He exhaled hard. I meant for the weekend, Naomi. Jesus, you know how stressed everyone's been. I just wanted one weekend without tension. The nerve of that almost took my breath away. Without tension. As though I had created the tension by existing in a room full of people who disliked me because he had taught them how. Asking your girlfriend to leave her own apartment because your friends are uncomfortable isn't tension? I asked. Oh my God, he snapped. See? This is what I'm talking about. You take everything and turn it into some huge statement. I let a beat of silence sit between us. Then I said, I think the huge statement was asking me to disappear. He did not answer immediately. When he did, his tone had shifted. Faster now, more defensive, words stepping on each other. You're twisting it. It was temporary. I didn't cheat on you. I didn't break up with you. I asked for space for 2 days. I looked down at the list in front of me. My handwriting had become neater as the call went on. You told me to leave, I said. You told me not to text you. You made it very clear you wanted me out of the way. You're being dramatic. There it was again. His favorite word for my pain whenever it inconvenienced him. But something had changed. It did not sting this time. It clarified. I could hear him now, the way a stranger might hear him. Not charming, not reasonable, just a man scrambling to rename his own cruelty because he had not expected it to cost him anything. I already did what you asked, I said quietly. I just didn't stop when it became convenient for you again. He went very still on the other end, then softer. You're seriously doing this? That question should not have broken my heart, but it did. Because he still thought this was the betrayal. My refusal, my boundary, my absence. Not the fact that he had stood in a doorway and treated me like luggage. He could move until company left. Yes, I said. A long pause followed. Then he laughed again, but this time it sounded thin. So what? You're just leaving? Throwing away 2 years over a weekend? I stared at the dark reflection of myself in the window. No, I said. I'm reacting correctly. Just late. That landed. I heard it in the silence that followed. He started talking again, but now the edges had changed. The confidence was gone. What replaced it was a frantic layering of reasons. His friends had a hard week. He did not want conflict. I knew how Vanessa was. Why couldn't I just be flexible? Why did everything have to become a principle with me? I listened until I could hear the pattern underneath the words. He was not trying to understand. He was trying to restore the old shape, the one where he set the terms and I worked around them. I'll come by tomorrow for the rest of my things, I said. What? His voice cracked slightly on that one word. Tomorrow, apparently, had been too real for him. Tomorrow meant action. Boxes, empty drawers, missing hangers. It meant this was no longer a dramatic mood he could outwait. I'll get the rest of my things tomorrow evening. Naomi, stop! I did not answer. Please, he said, and that startled me more than the anger had. Can we just talk when you get here? There's nothing to talk about tonight. There is for me. That almost got me. Not because it was romantic, not because it was vulnerable. Because for 1 week's second, I remembered all the times he had known exactly how to lower his voice, how to soften his edges just enough to make me doubt my own clarity. I stood up from the table and walked to the sink, forcing myself to keep moving. You should have wanted to talk before you asked me to leave, I said. He inhaled sharply like I had slapped him. That's not fair. It is. You know what? His voice hardened again, the softness gone as quickly as it came. Fine. If you want to be like this, be like this. There he was again, the man who could only tolerate emotion if it led him back to control. I looked at the dark window and saw my own face reflected there, tired, pale, but steadier than I had felt in months. I'll be there tomorrow at 6, I said. Then I ended the call. For a few seconds, I just stood there with the phone in my hand, listening to my own breathing. Rachel appeared in the kitchen doorway, reading my face. "Well?" she asked. "I'm getting the rest of my things tomorrow." She nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" The answer should have been yes. Probably, practically, it should have been. But I knew I needed to walk into that apartment and see it clearly with no witness softening the edges for me. "No," I said, "I need to do it myself." Monday morning felt unreal in the most ordinary ways. I still went to work. I still took the same train. I still stopped for coffee at the same place on the corner where the barista wrote N on my cup and smiled like nothing in the world had shifted. That was the strange cruelty of breakups like this. The world does not change its lighting for you. People still ask if you want oat milk. Meetings still start at 9. Your inbox still fills up. But my phone would not stop lighting up. Missed call. Text. Missed call. Text. At first, Ethan sounded irritated. "You're really blowing this up." Then offended. "Everyone thinks you're overreacting." Then strategic. "Can we just talk like adults?" That one almost made me laugh out loud at my desk. Like adults. As if there had been anything mature about exiling your girlfriend so your friends could enjoy the apartment without her. I did not answer any of it. At lunch, I finally sent one message. "I'll be there at 6 for the rest of my things." He replied almost instantly. "Good, we need to talk." I read it once and locked my screen. That evening, when I opened the apartment door, I knew before I stepped inside that he had prepared for a performance. The place was too clean. Candles burned on the console by the mirror. The throw pillows on the couch had been arranged with deliberate care. The blanket that usually lived in a heap on one armrest was folded neatly. Even the kitchen looked staged. Counters wiped, wine glasses washed, no trace left of the people who had mattered more than I did 48 hours earlier. And Ethan had changed too. He was wearing the charcoal sweater I once told him made him look softer. His hair was freshly washed. He had shaved. He looked like a curated version of himself, the one he put on when he wanted to win, rather than tell the truth. "You didn't have to be so extreme," he said as soon as I walked in. No hello, no apology, not even surprise. Just immediate framing. I stepped past him into the bedroom. "I'm here for my things." He followed me. "My friends think you misunderstood." I opened the closet and reached for my remaining clothes. I didn't. "Naomi." "No." I turned to face him, one hand still on a hanger. "You don't get to say that like this was confusion. You asked me to leave our apartment because your friends didn't want me there." His jaw tightened. "For one weekend." "That's not the important part." "Then what is?" I held his gaze. "The fact that you could ask at all." Something flickered across his face then. Annoyance, yes, but also something thinner, more uncertain. Like some small part of him had finally realized I was no longer speaking from inside the relationship. I was looking at it from outside now, and from out there, everything sounded different. He folded his arms. "So that's it? After everything we built?" I pulled a stack of sweaters from the shelf and laid them in my bag. "You built a life where I fit as long as it was convenient." "That's not true." "It is. You just don't like hearing it out loud." He scoffed and turned away for a second, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was losing the version of the argument he had prepared for. "You're acting like I cheated on you." I zipped one side of the bag and looked up at him. "No," I said. "I'm acting like you showed me exactly where I rank." That hit. I saw it in the way his face changed, not dramatically, but enough. The faint hardening around his eyes, the defensive lift of his chin. He wanted to argue with the wording, but he could not argue with the recognition inside it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The bedroom looked unbearably familiar. My side of the dresser half empty now, the indentation of our old routines still visible in all the small places, the tray where I left earrings, the chair where he dropped jeans, the book on my nightstand with a receipt still tucked inside as a bookmark. How many times had I mistaken familiarity for safety? He tried one last angle then, lowering his voice. "You're really ending this?" I put my toiletry bag into the suitcase and closed the lid. "You ended it when you decided I was optional." His face hardened instantly. "That's not fair." I stood up straight. "It is. You just never thought I'd say it." That silence between us was different from the others. Not confusion now. Not even anger exactly. Recognition. He knew I was gone. Maybe not emotionally all at once. Maybe not cleanly, but enough. Enough that whatever he said next would be about his own fear, not our future. When I carried the suitcase into the hallway, he did not help me. He stood near the kitchen, arms crossed again, watching me the way people watch damage they do not want to admit they caused. At the front door, he finally said, "You'll regret this." I turned back once. I looked at him. The candles, the polished apartment, the softened sweater, the man who had thought one weekend of exile was a manageable request, and I felt something inside me settle into place. "No," I said quietly. "You will." Then I walked out. 3 hours later, my phone rang. I already knew it was him before I saw the screen. I answered because some part of me needed to hear whether he would finally say the one thing he should have said first. He did not. "Naomi," he said, and his voice was measured now, careful, almost intimate. "I've been thinking. Maybe we rush this. I think we can work things out." I stood in Rachel's dark guest room with one hand on the strap of my bag and closed my eyes. There it was, the same assumption in gentler clothes, that this was still a negotiation, that he could still reopen what he had closed, that my leaving had only become real because he had not approved it yet. And for the first time since all of this started, my answer came without pain attached to it. "I already did," I said. He was silent. Then I ended the call. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I was happy, not because I was healed, but because for the first time in a very long while, I was no longer waiting for someone else to tell me whether I was allowed to stay. The silence lasted 2 days. Not the peaceful kind, not the kind that feels earned, the kind that sits just beneath your skin, waiting to see who breaks first. On Tuesday morning, I woke up in Rachel's apartment to sunlight cutting through the blinds in thin, uneven stripes across the wall. For a few seconds, I forgot again where I was, what had happened, what I had done. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hey, it's Ethan. I'm using Tyler's phone. Please answer." I stared at the message longer than I should have. There was something almost absurd about it, like he had run out of ways to reach me through his own life and was now borrowing other people's access just to push his voice back into mine. I didn't reply. A minute later, "I'm not trying to fight, I just want to understand." That word again. Understand. As if this were a misunderstanding. As if there had been confusion instead of clarity. I locked my phone and set it face down on the nightstand. Rachel glanced over from the kitchen. "Him?" "Yeah. You gonna answer?" "No." She nodded once. "Good." But it wasn't that simple. Because even without answering, he was still there, just outside the edges of my day, pressing at the boundaries I had finally drawn. That night he emailed me. Subject, "Can we talk?" No mention of logistics. No mention of the apartment, the bills, the furniture, the fact that half of what was in that space had once belonged to me. Just talk. Like words alone could rewind the moment he had asked me to leave. I didn't reply to that either. By Friday, the tone shifted. Not softer, sharper, more calculated. "I've been telling people you left because you couldn't handle my independence. I hope you're happy with how this makes you look." I read that message twice, then a third time, and something inside me went very still. Because there it was. Not confusion, not regret, narrative. He wasn't reaching out because he missed me. He was reaching out because he had lost control of the story. People had started asking questions, and instead of answering them honestly, he had rewritten me into something easier to explain. Unstable, immature, unable to handle him. I leaned back against the headboard and let out a slow breath. For 2 years, I had tried to make myself understandable to him. Measured my tone, softened my words, explained my reactions, adjusted my boundaries. And now, even in absence, I was still being edited into someone more convenient for him to manage. Rachel came into the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "You look like you're thinking too hard," she said. I handed her the phone. She read the message, then let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Of course he is." I tilted my head back against the wall. I thought he'd at least try to fix it before rewriting it. "He is fixing it," she said. "Just not with you." That landed. Because she was right. He wasn't trying to repair the relationship. He was repairing his image. That night, I made a decision that felt smaller than leaving, but in some ways, it mattered more. I stopped explaining myself. Not just to him. To anyone. When a mutual friend texted, "Hey, Ethan said things got weird. You okay?" I didn't type out the long, careful explanation I would have written a month ago. I didn't correct the framing. I didn't defend my version. I just replied, "I'm good," and left it there. That was new. And strangely, it felt heavier than silence. The following days came with a different kind of noise. Not direct messages, not calls, subtler things. Ethan started liking my old Instagram posts. Not the recent ones, old ones. Photos from a trip we took a year ago. A picture of me at the gym. A blurry shot of a sunset I barely remembered taking. The digital equivalent of knocking lightly and pretending it wasn't intentional. I ignored it. Then came the texts again. "I found your hoodie. Do you want it back?" I stared at that message for a long time. Not because of the hoodie, because of the phrasing. Like I had left something behind accidentally. Like I hadn't walked out with intention. I didn't respond. Another message followed. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That one almost got me. Not because it was enough, but because it was the closest he had come to acknowledging anything real. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted that too. Then I put the phone down and walked away, because I understood something now that I hadn't before. Intent doesn't erase impact, and I didn't mean to doesn't change what someone chose to do. A few nights later, just after midnight, my phone buzzed again. A voice note from Ethan. I almost didn't listen, but something in me needed to hear the tone. Not the words, the tone. I pressed play. His voice sounded different, quieter. Not performative, not sharp, just tired. I didn't think you'd actually leave, he said. There was a pause. I thought you'd cool off. Another pause. You always stay. I sat very still, the phone pressed to my ear. Because there it was. Not dressed up. Not defended. The truth. He hadn't expected me to accept his words. He had expected me to absorb them, to bend, to wait, to come back, like I always had before. The silence after his voice faded felt heavier than anything he'd said before. I replayed the message once, then again, not because I needed to understand it, but because I needed to let it settle all the way through me. For years, I had thought our relationship struggled because of communication, because of timing, because of stress, but it wasn't any of that. It was expectation. He expected me to stay, no matter what he said, no matter how far he pushed, no matter how small he made me feel. And because I had always stayed before, he believed I always would. I opened my messages, typed, deleted, typed again. Then finally, I sent one sentence. That's why I had to. No explanation, no elaboration, just the truth. The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, and nothing came back. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter, not happy, not healed, but unburdened in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Like I had finally stepped out of a conversation that had been looping for years. 2 weeks later, I signed the lease on my own apartment. It was small, slightly overpriced. The kind of place you justify by saying it's temporary, even when you know you need it more than you want to admit. But it was mine, every inch of it. The first night I sat on the floor surrounded by half-assembled furniture and unopened boxes, eating takeout straight from the container, and realized something quiet but profound. There was no commentary. No one telling me I was overthinking the layout. No one questioning why I chose one thing over another. No one correcting me. The silence wasn't empty. It was spacious. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn my place inside it. Ethan stopped contacting me directly after that, but I still felt the edges of him. Through other people, through fragments, through things said casually that carried more weight than they should have. He's having a rough time, one mutual friend told me over coffee. He didn't think you'd actually stick to it. That phrase again, stick to it, like my decision was temporary, like I might still return if enough time passed. I stirred my coffee slowly. I imagine she didn't. The friend hesitated. She says you kind of blindsided her. I smiled faintly at that. Blindsided. As if the warning signs hadn't been flashing for months. As if the sentence "I need you to leave" hadn't come out of her own mouth. I didn't correct it, not because it didn't matter, but because I was done participating in a version of myself that needed to be explained in order to be believed. A week later, I ran into Vanessa at a grocery store. The same Vanessa. The one who supposedly found me controlling. She froze when she saw me, her hand still on a carton of eggs. "Naomi," she said, forcing a small smile. "Hey." "Hey." We stood there for a second too long. Then she glanced down at her cart, then back at me. "She's different lately," she said carefully. "Ethan?" "Yeah," I nodded, I imagine. Vanessa shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable. "For what it's worth, I didn't know she told you to leave." I looked at her, really looked. Not defensive, not angry, just tired. "That's not how she explained it," Vanessa added quickly. I figured. Another silence. Then she said, "I'm sorry for everything, I guess." I gave her a small nod. "Take care, Vanessa," and walked away. Because that was the final piece falling into place. The story he told only worked, as long as no one looked too closely. A week later, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. For a second, I considered letting it ring out. But something about the timing, something quiet and instinctive, told me exactly who it was. I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end. Not the tense kind. Not the defensive kind I had gotten used to. Just hesitation. "Naomi." Ethan's voice sounded different. Not sharper. Not softer in the way he used when he wanted something. Just tired. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, looking out at the small living room of my apartment. The afternoon light filtered in through the thin curtains I hadn't gotten around to replacing yet, casting pale lines across the floor. "Hi," I said. Another pause. Then, quietly, "I didn't think it would feel like this." I didn't rush to fill the silence. Like what? I asked. He exhaled slowly. Empty. The words settled between us. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Just honest in a way he hadn't been before. I let my gaze drift across the room. My room. The chair I had chosen. The shelf I had put together myself. The mug sitting on the counter exactly where I had left it. Yeah, I said, it does. There was a faint shift in his breathing, like that answer had landed harder than he expected. For a while, he continued, I thought it was just you being stubborn. Like you'd come back when things cooled off. Of course he did. You always did before, he added. I didn't correct him. Because that part was true. And that truth had been the foundation of everything else. I keep replaying that night, he said after a moment, when I told you to leave. My fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the counter. I thought I was set in terms, he admitted. I didn't realize I was ending it. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it fixed anything, but because it finally named what had actually happened. Some people think ultimatums are control. They forget they are also exits. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the weight of that settle. I'm not calling to get back together, he added quickly. I just needed to say I see it now. There it was. Not quite an apology, but closer than anything he had offered before. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I'm glad you do, I said. A small pause. Then, quieter. I just wish you'd seen it when it mattered. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't try to reshape it. That silence said more than anything else could have. After a moment, he asked, Are you happier? I thought about that, about the last few weeks, about the quiet, about the absence of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I'm calmer, I said. He let out a breath that sounded like it hurt. I guess that makes sense. Another pause. Then, softer, I hope someone chooses you, without having to lose you first. That almost sounded like an apology. Almost. Take care, Ethan, I said. You too. The call ended, and just like that, it was over. Not in the explosive, cinematic way people expect. No shouting. No tears. No final dramatic line. Just finished. I set my phone down on the counter and stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment. The refrigerator. A car passing outside. The faint creak of the building settling. All of it felt steady. 6 months passed. That feels important to say, because for a while, I thought the story only mattered when it was fresh, when the messages were still unread, when the emotions still had edges sharp enough to cut through your day without warning. But it didn't. The truth of it settled later, in the quiet. In the ordinary moments no one writes about. Ethan tried dating again. I heard that through mutual friends, not because I asked, but because his name still drifted through conversations sometimes like an echo that hadn't fully faded. Apparently he compared people. Not in a flattering way. More like he was looking for something that felt familiar enough to control. That didn't make me feel vindicated. Just relieved. Relieved it wasn't my responsibility anymore. As for me, I didn't transform overnight. There was no sudden glow up. No dramatic reinvention. Just small, consistent changes. I spoke up sooner. I paid attention to discomfort instead of explaining it away. I left earlier when something felt wrong. And maybe most importantly, I stopped confusing patience with invisibility. That had been the quiet mistake all along. Not staying, not loving, but shrinking in order to make someone else comfortable. Sometimes I still think about that night, that sentence. I need you to leave for a bit. He thought it was temporary. He thought it was leverage. He thought I would step out, wait quietly, and come back when called. What he didn't understand, what he couldn't understand at the time, was that asking someone to leave doesn't come with a return clause. When he called me later, after his friends were gone, after the apartment was quiet again, he thought we were picking up where we left off. But when I said I already did, I wasn't being clever. I meant it. I worked things out in the moment I chose myself and didn't look back. That was the real ending. Not the call. Not the argument. Not even the night I walked out. It ended the second I understood that I didn't need permission to stay in my own life. Some endings aren't loud. They don't announce themselves with chaos or closure or perfect understanding. They arrive quietly. They settle. And then they stay.